It was one of those mornings that seemed to start before the sun was even ready to rise. The alarm buzzed faintly beside the bed, but Laura had already been awake for a while. She lay there quietly, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft breathing of her 4-year-old son Ethan asleep beside her. The old clock on the nightstand ticked slowly, marking another day she needed to push through. Laura sighed deeply and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. She wanted just 5 more minutes of peace before the world started demanding everything from her again. But peace was a rare thing in her life lately. She turned off the alarm before it could wake Ethan and slowly sat up. Her small apartment was still dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside that slipped through the blinds. She moved quietly to the kitchen, careful not to make the floor creak too loudly. The refrigerator hummed as she opened it, searching for milk that wasn't quite full and cereal that was almost gone. She made a small bowl for Ethan, even though she wasn't really hungry herself. There was barely enough coffee left for half a cup, but she poured it anyway and took a slow sip. It wasn't great, but it helped her think. Today was a big day, maybe the biggest she'd had in a long time. She had an interview, one that could finally change everything. It had been months since she lost her last job. The company where she'd worked part-time had cut staff suddenly, and as one of the newest employees, she was among the first to go. Since then, she'd been applying to everything she could find: customer service roles, admin work, data entry, even cleaning jobs. Some never replied. Others sent polite rejection emails. A few invited her for interviews that never led anywhere. But this one felt different. Westbrook Innovations. A company she'd only dreamed of working for. It wasn't just the paycheck she needed. It was the stability, the chance to finally stop worrying about rent, groceries, and daycare. She'd spent days preparing, researching the company, rehearsing her answers in front of the mirror after Ethan had gone to bed. She checked the time on her phone. 6:12 a.m. The interview was at 9. She had planned everything: get Ethan ready for daycare by 7:30, drop him off, and still have enough time to arrive 15 minutes early. She'd even picked out her clothes the night before: a pale blue blouse, black trousers, and the only pair of shoes that still looked professional enough to pass. Everything was supposed to go smoothly. By 7, Ethan was up, his hair sticking in every direction, clutching his toy car. "Mommy, are we going somewhere today?" he asked sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly, smiling as she helped him dress. "Mommy has something important today. You'll go play with your friends at daycare and I'll come get you after." He nodded, still half asleep, and hugged her legs. That small hug, those tiny arms, were the reason she kept going even when life seemed impossible. She brushed his hair gently, fixed his collar, and whispered, "We're going to be okay. I promise." At 7:15, she called her babysitter just to confirm. It had been arranged days ago. But after 3 rings, there was no answer. She tried again. Still nothing. Her heart started to beat a little faster. She left a message. "Hey, it's Laura, just checking that we're still good for this morning. Please call me back." She tried to sound calm, but inside, panic was starting to rise. By 7:30, still no response. She called again and again, until finally, a text message arrived. Her stomach dropped before she even opened it. "Sorry, Laura, can't make it today. My daughter's sick. Maybe next week." Those 2 words felt like a cruel joke. Laura stared at the screen, her hand shaking. No, she whispered. This couldn't be happening. Not today, not now. She sank onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall. She wanted to cry, but she didn't have time for that. Ethan came over, dragging his toy car across the floor. "Mommy, are we still going?" She looked at him, his innocent eyes, his trusting smile, and knew she couldn't give up. Not again. She had missed too many chances before. "Yes, we are," she said softly. "We have to, but what could she do?" She couldn't leave him home alone. She couldn't find another sitter in 30 minutes. She looked at her phone, then at the clock. It was already 7:45. If she left now, she could just make it. She took a deep breath, trying to think clearly. Maybe, just maybe, they'd understand. If she explained the situation, if she was honest, maybe they'd let her interview anyway. She'd worked too hard preparing to give up now. "All right, buddy," she said with forced cheer. "You're coming with Mommy today, but you have to be super quiet, okay?" Ethan's face lit up. "Okay. Can I bring my car?" She smiled faintly. "Yes, you can bring your car." She got him dressed warmly, grabbed her folder with her resume and notes, and stuffed a few snacks and tissues into her bag. As she locked the door behind them, she whispered a quiet prayer. The bus ride felt longer than usual. Laura tried to keep her nerves under control, bouncing Ethan gently on her knee while he stared out the window. The city moved past in a blur. Gray buildings, people rushing to work, cars honking, the usual Monday morning chaos. Her thoughts kept racing. What would they think when she showed up with a child? Would they turn her away immediately? Would they think she wasn't serious about the job? She clenched her hands tightly around her bag. All she wanted was a chance, to show them she was capable, hardworking, and ready to give her best. When they finally reached downtown, she stepped off the bus, adjusting Ethan's jacket against the wind. The Westbrook building stood tall and shining ahead of her, its glass reflecting the bright morning sun. It looked powerful and intimidating, like everything she wanted to be part of, but everything she felt she didn't belong in. She took a deep breath. "We can do this," she whispered. Inside the lobby, the marble floor gleamed. People in suits walked past with purpose. The receptionist smiled politely until she noticed Ethan holding Laura's hand. Then her expression shifted slightly, still polite but less warm. "Good morning," Laura said nervously, stepping forward. "I have an interview at 9 with Ms. Carter." The receptionist glanced at the child, then back at Laura. "Oh, I see. May I ask who's with you?" "This is my son," Laura said softly. "My babysitter canceled at the last minute. I didn't want to miss the interview." There was a pause. The receptionist's polite smile returned, though it felt tight. "Please have a seat for a moment. I'll let Ms. Carter know you've arrived." Laura nodded and took a seat in the waiting area. She could feel eyes on her, the quiet judgment of people passing by. Ethan sat beside her, swinging his legs and whispering softly to his toy car. Minutes passed slowly. She tried to focus on her breathing, on staying calm. Maybe it would be fine. Maybe Miss Carter would understand. At 9:05, a tall woman in a gray suit appeared from the hallway, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Her hair was neatly tied back and her expression was all business. "Ms. Bennett?" she said. "Yes, that's me." Laura stood quickly, straightening her blouse and smiling nervously. Ms. Carter's eyes flicked briefly to Ethan, then back to Laura. "I see you brought your son?" "Yes," Laura said carefully. "I'm so sorry. My babysitter had an emergency. I didn't want to miss the opportunity, so I brought him with me. He'll be quiet, I promise." Ms. Carter's lips pressed into a thin line. "Unfortunately, we can't conduct a professional interview under these circumstances. It's company policy to avoid distractions." Laura's heart sank. "I understand," she said quickly. "I completely understand. But I've been preparing for this interview for days. I promise it won't be an issue. He can sit quietly right here." Ms. Carter shook her head. "I appreciate your effort, but it wouldn't be fair to other candidates. We'll have to reschedule. Reschedule. That word again. The polite version of goodbye." Laura could feel the heat rising in her face. Her throat tightened, but she tried to hold herself together. "I understand," she whispered. "Is there another time, maybe later this week?" Ms. Carter sighed softly, as if already done with the conversation. "Our schedule is quite full at the moment. We'll be in touch." Laura nodded faintly. There was nothing left to say. She reached down for Ethan's hand. He looked up at her, confused, sensing that something was wrong. "Come on, sweetheart," she said softly. "Let's go." As she walked out of the lobby, her chest ached. The automatic doors opened with a quiet hiss and the cold air hit her face. She blinked back tears but couldn't stop one from slipping down her cheek. Outside, she crouched beside Ethan. "Hey, it's okay," she whispered, forcing a smile. "Mommy just has to try again next time, okay?" He nodded slowly and handed her his toy car like he was offering comfort. "You can hold it, Mommy." That small gesture nearly broke her. She hugged him tightly, breathing in the soft scent of his hair. For a moment, she just stood there on the sidewalk holding her son, trying to steady herself. People passed by, rushing to work, oblivious to her pain. She felt invisible, like she always did. But deep down, beneath the disappointment and exhaustion, there was still something left. Something small but strong. Hope. Because even if no one else believed in her right now, she still believed somehow that things could change. She looked up at the sky, squinting against the sunlight. "One day," she whispered, "I'll tell you this story, Ethan, and it'll have a happy ending. She didn't know how or when, but she had to believe it. For him, for both of them. As she began walking down the busy street, her heart heavy but her grip on Ethan's hand firm, she had no idea that this wasn't the end of her story at all. It was only the beginning. Laura spent the rest of that morning walking aimlessly through the city, with Ethan's small hand wrapped around hers. She didn't have the energy to go home yet. The thought of walking back into that tiny apartment, sitting on the worn couch and facing another rejection, felt too heavy to bear. She had promised herself that today would be different. Today was supposed to be the start of something better. She stopped at a park bench near a quiet corner of the city. It wasn't big, just a patch of green surrounded by traffic and tall buildings. Ethan ran toward the playground, laughing as he climbed the small slide, his toy car still in his hand. His laughter was soft but full of life, and somehow it made her chest ache even more. Laura sat down, clutching her folder of resumes. She flipped it open and stared at the papers she had printed so carefully the night before. Her name at the top of each page looked so official, so ready to belong to someone confident and successful. But now it just felt like a reminder of everything she was trying to be, and everything she wasn't. The world didn't stop for anyone. People walked past with coffee cups and phones, hurrying toward meetings and offices. She wondered if they noticed her sitting there, or if she had become invisible like so many others trying to survive. After a while, Ethan ran back, cheeks pink from the wind. "Mommy, are you sad?" he asked softly. She forced a smile and shook her head. "No, baby. Mommy's just thinking." "About what?" "About how we're going to make things better." He nodded as if he understood, even though he was too young to grasp what better really meant. By noon, she decided to go home. The bus ride was quiet. Ethan leaned his head on her arm and fell asleep halfway through. She watched him and thought about how he trusted her completely, how he believed she could fix everything. That belief scared her more than anything because she wasn't sure she could. When they reached home, she carried him inside, laid him gently on the bed, and sat beside him. The apartment was small. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living area that doubled as her workspace. On the wall above the couch was a drawing Ethan had made of the two of them holding hands under a big sun. She stared at it for a long moment before taking out her phone. Her notifications showed nothing new. No missed calls, no messages from the company, no follow-up emails. She opened her email app again just in case and refreshed it. Nothing. Her stomach felt hollow. She closed her eyes and let out a long breath. She could still hear Ms. Carter's voice in her head. Calm, polite, final. "We'll be in touch." She had heard that line so many times that it had lost all meaning. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, she sat at the small table near the window with her laptop. The screen glowed softly in the dark. She started searching for other job openings, scrolling through pages and pages of listings. Most of them required experience she didn't have or schedules she couldn't manage because of Ethan. Still, she applied anyway, sending out resumes into the void. Each click felt like a small act of hope, even if she didn't fully believe it would lead anywhere. She stayed up until almost midnight, reading about interview tips, company culture, and personal stories of people who had started from nothing. Some made her smile. Others made her cry quietly. When she finally shut the laptop, she felt a strange mix of exhaustion and determination. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow she'd try again. The next morning, the phone rang. It startled her, and she nearly spilled the cereal she was pouring. She grabbed it quickly, her heart skipping. "Hello? Hello, is this Laura Bennett?" A woman's voice said. "Yes, speaking. This is Melanie from Westbrook Innovations. Ms. Carter asked me to confirm if you're available for a follow-up interview this week." Laura froze. Yes. Yes, I'm available. Thank you so much." The voice continued. "The CEO, Mr. Westbrook, will be in the building that day and would like to sit in for a few candidate interviews. Can you come tomorrow at 10? Her breath caught in her throat. The CEO himself? She almost couldn't believe it. "Yes, absolutely. I'll be there." After the call ended, she stood there for a moment, clutching the phone, not sure whether to laugh or cry. Ethan came running out of the room, waving his toy car. "Mommy, what happened?" She knelt down and hugged him tightly. "Mommy got another chance," she whispered. The rest of the day she moved with a new kind of energy. She washed and ironed her blouse again, polished her shoes, rechecked her documents. She even rehearsed her answers one more time, speaking softly to her reflection in the mirror. But there was still one thing weighing on her: what to do with Ethan. She called the babysitter again, but her phone went straight to voicemail. She called a neighbor who sometimes watched Ethan, but she was working that morning. She posted in a local moms group, hoping someone nearby could help. By nightfall, she still hadn't found anyone. As she tucked Ethan into bed, she sat beside him and brushed his hair gently. "Sweetheart, Mommy has another interview tomorrow. It's really important," he yawned and nodded. "Will I go with you again?" She hesitated. "Maybe, but you'll have to be extra quiet this time." "I can be quiet," he said proudly. "Like a mouse." She smiled softly and kissed his forehead. "You're my brave boy." That night she barely slept. Her mind kept running through scenarios. What if they turned her away again? What if she embarrassed herself? What if the CEO thought she was unprofessional? But she pushed those thoughts aside. She had to try. The next morning she woke up early, dressed neatly, and made sure Ethan ate his breakfast. She packed snacks, a coloring book, and his favorite toy car into her bag, hoping it would keep him busy. By 9:30, they were standing once again in front of the tall glass building. The same place that had felt like rejection now looked like a second chance. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside. The receptionist recognized her and gave a small nod. "Good morning, Ms. Bennett. You're here for the second interview?" "Yes," Laura said nervously. "Thank you." This time the receptionist didn't question Ethan. She simply called upstairs to let them know. Laura sat down again, her palms sweating. She could feel every minute stretch endlessly. At exactly 10, the elevator doors opened and Ms. Carter appeared once more. She smiled, more forced than friendly, but motioned for Laura to follow. "This way, please," she said. Laura stood, holding Ethan's hand. "Would it be all right if he—" Ms. Carter interrupted quickly. "Yes, I suppose it's fine for now. Mr. Westbrook wanted to meet you personally." Laura blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected that. They walked down a long hallway lined with glass offices. Everything looked spotless and modern. She caught glimpses of people working behind the doors, focused, confident, the kind of people who belonged here. When they reached the end of the hallway, Ms. Carter stopped in front of a large glass door. "Please wait here," she said and went inside first. Through the glass, Laura saw a tall man standing near the window talking with someone. His presence was calm yet commanding. He turned slightly, and she recognized him instantly from the company's website. Daniel Westbrook, the founder and CEO. After a brief exchange with Ms. Carter, he nodded and motioned for Laura to enter. She stepped in carefully, guiding Ethan beside her. Her pulse was racing. "Good morning, Ms. Bennett," he said with a warm smile. His voice was gentle but carried authority. "Please have a seat." "Thank you," she said softly, sitting down. Ethan sat quietly beside her, clutching his toy. Daniel glanced at the child, then back at her. "Your son?" "Yes," Laura admitted. "I'm sorry for bringing him. My childcare situation fell through again. I didn't want to cancel a second time." He nodded slowly. "No need to apologize. It happens." His tone was kind, not dismissive like Ms. Carter's had been. He sat down across from her. "I read your application. You've had quite a varied career. Administrative work, sales, customer service. That's a lot of adaptability." Laura smiled faintly. "You could say I've learned to do a bit of everything." "That's a good thing," he said. "Tell me, what made you interested in Westbrook Innovations?" She took a deep breath and began speaking from her heart. "Because this company builds things that make life easier for people. And I understand what it means when life isn't easy. I want to be part of something that helps others." Daniel leaned back slightly, his eyes thoughtful. "That's a good answer." Ethan, sitting quietly, began coloring in his book. Every now and then, Daniel would glance at him with a soft smile. As the interview continued, Laura felt herself relax. For once, she wasn't pretending. She was just being honest about her experiences, her challenges, and her motivation. When it was over, Daniel stood and shook her hand. "Thank you, Ms. Bennett. I appreciate your honesty and your time." "Thank you for giving me the chance," she said sincerely. He smiled. "Sometimes the right people just need the right opportunity. We'll be in touch soon." As she left the office, Laura couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in a long time, she felt like someone had really seen her. not just as a single mother struggling to make ends meet, but as a capable person who deserved a chance. On the bus ride home, Ethan leaned against her arm again. "Mommy, did it go good?" She looked out the window at the bright sky and said softly, "I think it did, sweetheart. I think it really did." That night, she put him to bed early, then sat by the window again, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for once the future didn't feel so dark. It felt open, like a door she could finally walk through. And though she didn't know it yet, that single interview, the one she thought might end in another rejection, was about to change her life forever. Laura woke up the next morning with a strange mix of peace and fear in her heart. The peace came from the fact that for the first time in months, she had walked out of an interview feeling like she had done something right. The fear came from the waiting, the quiet space between hope and disappointment that she knew too well. She checked her phone every few minutes that morning, half expecting an email or call, but the screen stayed silent. She tried to keep herself busy. She cleaned the kitchen, folded the laundry, and played with Ethan for a while. But her mind kept drifting back to that tall office, to the warm tone of Daniel's voice when he said, "We'll be in touch." She didn't want to hope too much. Hope was dangerous. It had disappointed her before. But still, it was there, glowing faintly inside her chest like a tiny candle that refused to go out. By the afternoon, she took Ethan for a walk to the small park near their apartment. He ran ahead, chasing a pigeon with his toy car, while she sat on a bench checking her phone again. Nothing. She sighed softly, reminding herself to be patient. Big companies took time. Maybe they were still deciding. 2 days passed, then 3. Still nothing. Each night she went to bed replaying the interview in her head, wondering if she had said something wrong, if she had seemed too desperate, if bringing Ethan had cost her the job again. On the 4th day, as she was making dinner, her phone rang. Her heart stopped for a moment. She wiped her hands quickly and picked it up. "Hello? Good evening. Is this Ms. Bennett?" "Yes, speaking. This is Melanie from Westbrook Innovations. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Westbrook. He wanted me to inform you that you've been selected for the position." Laura froze, gripping the counter to steady herself. Are you serious?" "Yes," Melanie replied with a smile in her voice. "He was very impressed with your interview and wanted to personally approve your hiring." "Congratulations, Ms. Bennett." Tears welled up in Laura's eyes before she could stop them. "Thank you so much." "Thank you, really." Melanie went over the details. Start date, documents, training schedule. But Laura barely heard half of it. All she could think was, it finally happened. After she hung up, she sank onto the couch, covering her face with her hands as tears of relief rolled down her cheeks. Ethan ran into the room, confused. "Mommy, what's wrong?" She pulled him close and hugged him tightly. "Nothing's wrong, baby. Everything's right. Mommy got the job." He clapped his little hands, giggling. "You did it, Mommy. You're the best." She laughed through her tears. "No, sweetheart. We did it." That night, they celebrated with pancakes for dinner, Ethan's favorite. They sat on the floor, eating and laughing like it was the best meal in the world. For the first time in months, Laura didn't feel like she was barely surviving. She felt like she was starting to live again. When she lay down that night, she stared at the ceiling with a quiet smile. "Thank you," she whispered softly. To the universe, to fate, to whoever had listened when she needed help most. The next few days were busy. She filled out forms, got her documents in order, and bought a second-hand handbag from a thrift store for her first day. She even found a new babysitter through a neighbor, a kind older woman named Mrs. Lee, who lived 2 doors down and loved spending time with children. On her first morning at Westbrook Innovations, Laura woke up before the alarm. She dressed carefully, double-checked everything, and kissed Ethan goodbye before leaving. Her stomach was full of nerves, but her heart was light. When she arrived at the office, she was greeted by Melanie from HR, who gave her a tour of the building. Everything felt surreal. The wide hallways, the soft hum of printers, the smell of fresh coffee. People smiled politely as she passed, and for the first time, she felt like she belonged somewhere important. She was assigned to the administration department, helping coordinate schedules, handle client communications, and manage internal paperwork. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, organized, and safe, and that meant everything. Over the first few weeks, she learned quickly. She stayed late some nights, double-checking her work, making sure every email was perfect. She didn't want anyone to ever think hiring her had been a mistake. Her colleagues began to notice her dedication. One afternoon, her supervisor, a woman named Clara, stopped by her desk and said, "You've been doing really well, Laura. Keep it up." Those words meant more to her than any paycheck. Sometimes she caught glimpses of Daniel, the CEO, walking through the halls or talking with staff. He always had that same calm energy, confident but approachable. Once he passed her in the hallway and gave a small nod and smile. She smiled back, trying not to look too nervous. At home, life slowly began to change. She was able to buy fresh groceries without counting every coin. She paid her bills on time. She even bought Ethan a small set of colored pencils he'd been eyeing at the store. One night, as they sat together drawing, Ethan said, "Mommy, you're happy now." She looked at him, surprised. "What makes you say that?" "Because you smile more now," he said simply. Her eyes softened. "You're right," she whispered. "I am." But as weeks turned into months, something else began to happen. Something Laura didn't expect. People at work started to notice her story. It began when one of her coworkers mentioned to another how she had brought her son to her interview that day. Soon it spread quietly through the office, not as gossip but as something people admired. One afternoon, Clara pulled her aside. "You know, Daniel told me what happened the day he met you," she said with a kind smile. "He was really impressed, not just by your skills but by your courage. Not many people would have shown up under those circumstances." Laura blushed. "I didn't really have a choice, I just couldn't give up." "That's exactly why he wanted to hire you," Clara said. "He said people like you remind him why this company exists." Those words stayed with Laura for days. She didn't think of herself as brave. She had just done what she had to do. But hearing that the CEO himself had said that, it made her realize that maybe her struggles weren't something to be ashamed of. Maybe they were proof of her strength. A few weeks later, there was a company meeting in the main hall. Daniel stood at the front speaking about a new initiative, one focused on supporting parents and caregivers in the workplace. He talked about flexible schedules, childcare assistance, and remote work options for those who needed it. As he spoke, Laura sat near the back, listening quietly. Then he said something that made her heart skip. "I met someone recently who reminded me what real dedication looks like," Daniel said. She came to her interview under difficult circumstances, but instead of canceling or making excuses, she showed up. She proved that commitment isn't always about convenience, and sometimes it's about courage. The room was silent. He didn't mention her name, but everyone knew. A few heads turned toward her, smiling softly. Laura's cheeks flushed, and she lowered her gaze, feeling both embarrassed and proud. After the meeting, several co-workers came up to her to congratulate her. One of them said, "You've really inspired a lot of us." "You know that?" She smiled shyly. "I just did what I had to do." That evening, as she walked home, she thought about how far she'd come from that day in the lobby, the day she'd almost walked away in tears. Now she was working in that same building, respected and valued. Life had changed in ways she hadn't dared to imagine, but the best part was still waiting for her at home. When she opened the apartment door, Ethan came running to her, shouting, "Mommy!" and threw his arms around her legs. She laughed, kneeling down to hug him. "How was your day?" "I drew a rocket ship," he said proudly, holding up his paper. She smiled. "That's amazing, buddy. You're my little artist," he beamed, then asked, "Did you have a good day, Mommy?" Laura looked at him and felt her heart swell. "The best day," she said softly. Later that night, after putting Ethan to sleep, she sat on the couch, staring out the window at the glowing city lights. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about what could go wrong. She was thinking about what could go right. She picked up her phone and saw a message from Clara. "You really made an impression today. Everyone's talking about how strong you are." "Proud of you," Laura smiled. She didn't reply right away. She just sat there, letting the warmth of those words settle in. It wasn't fame or money that made her feel successful. It was knowing that all the pain, all the nights she'd stayed awake worrying, all the moments she'd doubted herself, they had led her here. She looked toward Ethan's room where she could hear his soft breathing. That sound had carried her through everything. "Mommy's doing it," she whispered. "We're really doing it. Outside, The city buzzed with life, but inside their small apartment, there was peace, a kind of quiet victory that didn't need applause. Laura didn't know what the future held, but she no longer feared it. She had learned that sometimes the most unexpected moments, even the ones that feel like endings, are just new beginnings in disguise. And somewhere deep inside, she had a feeling that her story was only getting started. When Laura sat down in the wide chair across from Daniel's desk, she still couldn't believe what was happening. Just 10 minutes ago, she was being told to leave the building. Now she was sitting in front of the man whose name was printed on every wall and product of the company. Her palms were still slightly damp, her heart racing as if it hadn't realized that things might be okay now. Ethan sat quietly beside her, drawing little shapes on a spare sheet of paper Daniel had given him. Daniel leaned back slightly, his eyes kind but sharp, like someone who noticed everything without making you uncomfortable. He asked softly, "So you came for the marketing assistant interview today, right?" Laura nodded, trying to steady her voice. "Yes, sir. I had an appointment with Miss Carter, but things didn't go as planned." "I can imagine," Daniel said, glancing briefly toward the glass wall of his office where the HR department was visible across the hall. "You don't need to explain everything right now. Let's start fresh. Pretend this is your first interview today. Tell me about yourself." His calm tone helped her breathe again. She took a slow inhale, then began. "I've been working in marketing for a few years now. I started at a small local company where I helped with social media and brand promotion. After that, I took on freelance projects when I became a mother. It wasn't easy, but I learned how to manage time and deliver work under pressure." Daniel nodded slowly, listening carefully. He didn't interrupt. That alone made her feel more seen than she had all morning. When she paused, he asked, "What kind of work do you enjoy most in marketing?" Laura smiled a little, realizing this was her chance to be herself. "I like storytelling. I believe every product, no matter how small, has a story behind it. When you tell that story in a way people can feel it, they trust the brand more. That's what I enjoy." "That's a good answer," Daniel said. "You sound like someone who understands people, not just numbers." Laura looked at him with quiet surprise. She had expected the CEO of such a big company to be all about data and results, but he seemed to care about meaning, too. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "You said you worked freelance for a while. That means you handled everything yourself, right? Clients, deadlines, finances?" "Yes," she said, nodding. "And sometimes while feeding a toddler or putting him to sleep. It taught me how to multitask better than any office job could." Daniel chuckled softly, shaking his head in admiration. "I can only imagine. That's more project management experience than most people get in 5 years. Ethan looked up from his paper just then and proudly held up his drawing. It was a messy picture of a tall building with stick figures standing beside it, one of them with long hair, another small one holding hands. "This is me and Mommy," he said. "And that's your building." Daniel smiled warmly, taking a good look at it. "That's really good, buddy. Looks like you're an artist." Ethan grinned and went back to coloring while Laura whispered, "Say thank you." Daniel returned his gaze to her. "You know, not everyone would still show up to an interview after the kind of morning you've had." "I almost didn't," she admitted. "When the babysitter canceled, I thought about calling and apologizing. But something told me to come anyway. I just couldn't afford to lose another opportunity." "That tells me something important," Daniel said. "You don't quit easily." Laura blushed slightly, unsure how to respond. "I guess I just try to keep going, even when it's hard." "Good," Daniel said with a smile. "That's exactly the kind of person I want working here." For a moment, she didn't fully process his words. Her mind repeated them silently before she managed to ask, "You mean—" "I mean," he said clearly, "you have the attitude I wish more people had. Skills can be taught, but determination, especially the kind you have, comes from real life." He reached for a folder on his desk and opened it. "I looked at your resume while you were talking. Your work history and portfolio are solid. You clearly know what you're doing." Laura blinked, realizing he had already made up his mind. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept the offer," Daniel said lightly, but his eyes were serious. Tears started to form in Laura's eyes, though she tried to hide them with a shaky laugh. "I don't even know if this is real. I was being shown the door half an hour ago." "Sometimes," Daniel said, "doors close so better ones can open." There was silence for a few seconds. The sound of Ethan's crayon scratching softly on paper filled the room. Then Daniel added, "You'll start next week. We'll have HR finalize the paperwork today. I'll make sure you have a flexible schedule for the first few months so you can settle in." Laura's mouth fell open slightly. "Flexible schedule?" "Yes, I know how it is." "I grew up with a single mother myself," he said. "She worked 2 jobs and still made time to read to me every night. People like her, and like you, deserve to be in places where effort is valued, not dismissed." That was the moment the tears came freely. Laura didn't even try to stop them this time. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "You have no idea how much this means." Daniel handed her a tissue from the side of his desk. "I think I do." He stood and extended his hand, and she stood too, holding Ethan's little hand with her other one. When she shook Daniel's hand, it wasn't just a handshake. It felt like a new beginning. Ethan tugged her sleeve and whispered, "Mommy, did you get the job?" Laura knelt down, smiled through her tears, and said softly, "Yes, baby, Mommy got the job." Daniel laughed gently. "That's right, young man. Your mom's going to do great things here." Ethan smiled shyly, then offered Daniel one of his crayons. "You can keep this." Daniel took it with a smile. "I will. A reminder of today." After the interview, as Laura and Ethan walked out of the office, every step felt lighter. The receptionist who had seen her earlier looked surprised but smiled awkwardly when Daniel waved at her from his office. Laura didn't feel angry or bitter anymore. The humiliation from earlier seemed small compared to the gratitude she felt now. When they stepped outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. Ethan ran ahead a few steps, spinning in circles and laughing. For the first time in months, Laura let herself laugh too. That evening, after putting Ethan to bed, she sat quietly by the window in their small apartment. The city lights blinked below, and her phone buzzed with a new email, her official offer letter. She stared at it for a long time, then looked over at Ethan's toy car sitting on the coffee table. She whispered to herself, "We did it." It wasn't just about getting the job. It was about being seen, about being respected for who she was and everything she carried. The world had tried to tell her that being a mother made her less capable, but today proved the opposite. Her strength, her honesty, and her love for her son were the very things that got her noticed. Over the next few days, Laura prepared herself for the new chapter. She bought a second-hand laptop, ironed her clothes carefully, and even managed to find a daycare close to her new office. Every small step made her feel more confident. When she walked into the company again the next week, she felt the difference. People greeted her kindly. The HR manager, Ms. Carter, offered a polite smile, avoiding direct eye contact, but that was okay. Laura didn't need anyone's approval now. She knew she belonged there. During her first week, Daniel stopped by her desk one afternoon just to check in. "How's everything going so far?" he asked. Laura looked up, smiling. "Really well. Everyone's been so welcoming." "Good," Daniel said. "You're already bringing great ideas to the team. Keep that up." She thanked him, and after he left, her teammates turned to her with curious smiles. One of them whispered, "You're the only person I've ever seen the CEO personally on board." Laura laughed, shaking her head. "I think I just got lucky," but deep down, she knew it wasn't luck, it was the power of not giving up. Even when everything seemed to fall apart. That evening, when she went to pick up Ethan from daycare, he ran into her arms, shouting, "Mommy, did you do good at work?" She hugged him tightly and said, "Yes, sweetheart. I did good." On the way home, Ethan hummed in the back seat while she drove. The streetlights passed one by one, and she thought about all the nights she had cried quietly, wondering if life would ever get easier. It wasn't easy now, but it was better. There was hope again, and hope was enough. By the end of the week, Daniel sent a short company-wide email. It said, "This week we welcomed a new member to our marketing team who reminded me of something important, that strength doesn't always look like confidence in a suit. Sometimes it looks like showing up, even when everything tries to stop you. Let's continue building a workplace that values real people, real effort, and real courage." When Laura read that, she knew he was talking about her. She didn't need the recognition, but reading those words made her heart full. She wasn't just another employee, she was part of something bigger. That weekend, she and Ethan celebrated with takeout pizza. He asked if he could stay up late to watch cartoons, and she said yes. They sat together on the couch, crumbs everywhere, laughter filling the small room. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel scary anymore. She tucked Ethan into bed later that night, brushed a strand of hair off his forehead and whispered, "You're the reason I never gave up." He smiled sleepily and mumbled, "I love you, Mommy," before drifting off. Laura sat by his bedside for a few minutes, watching his little chest rise and fall. The world outside was still uncertain, but she had found her place. And deep down, she knew one thing for sure. When life tried to shut one door, it was only making space for a better one to open. The weeks that followed were the busiest and most exciting days Laura had experienced in years. Every morning she woke up early, helped Ethan get ready for daycare, and then took the bus to her new office. Each ride felt different now. The same streets she once crossed with anxiety now filled her with pride and purpose. The tiredness was still there, but it was lighter, a kind of tiredness that came with hope. At work, Laura quickly became one of the most dependable people on the marketing team. She didn't just complete her tasks, she gave everything a human touch. While others created campaigns full of fancy terms and technical phrases, Laura made her ideas simple and real, stories people could connect with. Daniel noticed it too. He often stopped by her desk to ask about her projects, not as a boss, but as someone genuinely interested in her thoughts. One afternoon, during a meeting, Laura presented a small campaign idea for a local charity project the company supported. It wasn't anything grand, but she spoke from her heart. "I think we should tell stories of people we've helped instead of just showing numbers," she said. "When people see faces and emotions, they care more." The room went quiet for a second before Daniel smiled and said, "Exactly. That's what marketing should be. Not just selling, but connecting." Her co-workers started looking at her differently after that. She wasn't just the new hire anymore. She was someone with ideas that mattered. Even Ms. Carter, who once dismissed her, treated her with a cautious respect now. Laura didn't hold any grudge. She simply smiled and did her work with quiet confidence. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. At home, Ethan noticed the change too. He loved seeing his mother happy. Every day when she picked him up from daycare, he'd ask, "Mommy, did you make new friends at work?" And she would laugh and tell him about her team. Sometimes she even brought home small gifts from her colleagues. A cupcake from someone's birthday, a sticker for Ethan, or a thank you note from Daniel. One Friday evening, as she was getting ready to leave, Daniel stopped by her desk again. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. She nodded and they walked into his office. "I've been thinking," he began. "We're planning a company-wide meeting next month. I want you to share your story." "My story?" Laura asked, confused. "Yes," Daniel said simply. "The day we met. The reason you're here. I think people need to hear it. It's not just about what happened, it's about what it means for all of us." Laura hesitated. "I'm not sure I'd be good at that kind of thing." Daniel smiled. "You'll do fine. Just speak from your heart, that's what you do best." She thought about it on her way home. The idea of standing in front of hundreds of people made her nervous. But deep down she knew it wasn't about her anymore. It was about showing others that life doesn't end when things go wrong. Sometimes it just begins differently. When the day finally came, the auditorium was full. The lights were warm, and a quiet hum of conversation filled the air. Laura stood backstage holding a piece of paper with her notes, though she knew she probably wouldn't read from it. Her palms were sweaty and her stomach felt tight. But when she saw Ethan sitting in the front row beside Daniel, smiling proudly, all the fear slowly faded. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage. For a moment, the crowd seemed to disappear, and she spoke as if telling her story to a friend. She started with honesty. "A few months ago, I walked into this building thinking it would be just another interview. I was nervous, I was tired, and I had my 4-year-old son with me because my babysitter canceled last minute. I was embarrassed, afraid people would think I was unprofessional. And for a while I was right, nigga, that's exactly what happened." The audience listened quietly. She continued, "But then something unexpected happened. Someone saw me not as a mistake or inconvenience, but as a person trying her best. And that changed everything." She looked at Daniel, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. "Since then," she said, "I've realized something important. Sometimes life tests you right before it rewards you. That day I thought I was walking out of this building in failure, but it turns out I was walking toward the best opportunity of my life." When she finished, the room filled with applause. Some people even stood up. Laura felt her chest swell with emotion. She didn't expect such a reaction. She wiped a tear quickly, smiled at Ethan, and whispered, "We did it again." After the meeting, people came up to her to thank her for sharing her story. A few employees admitted they had been struggling too, balancing family, stress, or fear of judgment. One woman said quietly, "You gave me courage. I was thinking of quitting my job because of my child's health issues. But now I think I'll try a little longer." Later that day, Daniel posted a short message on the company's social media page along with a photo of the event. He wrote, "Sometimes the best lessons in leadership come from listening, not talking. Today, one of our team members reminded us that kindness and understanding can change lives and workplaces." The post spread faster than anyone expected. Within hours, people from different countries started sharing it. Some added their own experiences about work, parenthood, and second chances. By the end of the week, the post had thousands of likes and hundreds of comments. Journalists even reached out asking for interviews, but Laura politely declined most of them. She didn't want fame. She just wanted to work, take care of her son, and live peacefully. But even without interviews, her story found its way into the world. A local news channel featured a short segment about it, calling it the story that redefined hiring. People wrote emails to the company thanking them for supporting working parents. A few businesses even started talking about adopting similar family-friendly policies. One evening, while Laura was making dinner, her phone buzzed. It was an email from a woman named Karen, who owned a small startup. The subject read, "Thank you for changing my mind." The message said, "I used to reject applicants if they mentioned they were single parents, thinking it would affect their focus. After hearing your story, I realized how wrong I was. Yesterday, I hired a young mother who reminded me of you. She starts next week. Thank you." Laura sat at the kitchen table reading it over and over. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from something deeper. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, her experience had helped others too. That night, she told Ethan the story as he was getting ready for bed. "Do you remember that day I took you to my interview?" she asked. He nodded sleepily. "The day I drew on the paper in the big office?" "Yes," she said, smiling. "That day changed everything. Because of you, I didn't give up." He yawned, hugging his toy car. "Then I'm your lucky charm," she laughed softly. "You are, baby. You always will be." Months passed and life became steady. Laura continued to grow in her role. She led small projects, mentored interns, and even suggested a flexible working plan that helped parents manage their schedules better. Daniel approved it instantly. It was officially called the Family Balance Initiative, and soon it became part of the company's core values. Sometimes Laura would sit in the break room, sipping coffee while watching new employees walk in. She would see the same nervous look she once had, the look of someone hoping for a chance. And she always made sure to greet them warmly, to remind them that kindness costs nothing but can mean everything. One afternoon, Daniel called her into his office again. "I just wanted to say thank you," he told her. "You've made this place better." "People talk to each other differently now, more openly, more humanly," Laura smiled. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did." Daniel shook his head lightly. "I didn't do anything special. I just saw what was already there." Before she left, he added, "You know, there's something else I've noticed. That drawing your son made, the one he gave me that day, it's still on my wall. Every time I look at it, I remember why I started this company. Not for money or fame, but to build something meaningful." Laura looked at him with quiet gratitude. He'll be happy to know that. That evening, when she picked up Ethan, she told him about it. His eyes lit up. "My picture is still in his office?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "He keeps it as a reminder." Ethan grinned proudly. "Then I helped too." "Yes," Laura said, hugging him tightly. "You helped the most." Years later, when people at the company talked about their proudest moments, someone would always bring up Laura's story. It became part of the company's culture, a reminder that success and compassion can exist together. Her story was shared in training sessions, in leadership talks, and even in schools. It became more than just a story about a job. It became a lesson about empathy, courage, and the power of never giving up. And through it all, Laura stayed humble. She still took the bus to work, still packed Ethan's lunch every morning, and still smiled at every new face she met. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was full of meaning, of hope, and of proof that even when everything seems impossible, one act of kindness can change everything. Sometimes, late at night, she would stand by her window, watching the city lights, remembering the day she almost walked away in tears. And every time she thought of that,